views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. For generations, Bronxites have pushed for self-determination as a way to definitively improve quality of life in their hometown, whether it's through community land trusts or urban farms or the establishment of credit unions to build economic stability. The idea is to transform the seat of power from top down to grassroots. Tonight, we've got three advocates with us to present well-thought-out, innovative ways to, in plain language, build a better Bronx. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming the president and CEO of Nos Quedamos. It is Jessica Clemente. Nice to have you with us, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
The director of community development for NWBCCC. If you don't know, it's the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. Edward Garcia, nice to see you.
Thank you.
And a farmer and activist who is the co-owner of Rise and Root Farm. She's also the co-founder of Black Urban Growers. It is a longtime farmer, Bronx farmer and friend, Karen Washington. Karen, always nice to see you.
Same here.
Jessica, let's just start with you. People have heard about Nos Quedamos. They said, oh, they are something. It means we stay. So why don't we go back in history, talk a little bit about how it was founded, and then maybe a nice comparison between what you were founded for, what you have done, and where we're at right now.
Sure. I'd definitely love to take the opportunity to really build on how Nos Quedamos, which was based in the Borough section of the South Bronx, almost 30 years ago now,
Wow.
Where we stand is where the community took action, stepped up, spoke out about, planning that was being taking place in a community that was all about top down, what folks thought was economic revitalization, opportunity and growth. But for us, and this goes back to Mama Yolanda, who we affectionately call Yolanda Garcia, Mama Yolanda, it's about those who are closest to the problems being closest to the solutions and being respected for putting forward those solutions and being valued for it. And so what they did was Yolanda Garcia and other community members seized the opportunity to say, you know what, we want to put forward our own plan. And so community planning, everything that went down from protecting open space to having affordable housing, affordable home ownership, because affordable housing is one piece of the puzzle, but really anchoring communities in the long term has to have a mixed view and opportunity for ownership and home ownership being one of those pipelines.
Looking back 30 years, do you feel that it has been a successful endeavor, a frustrating endeavor, or kind of we did okay, but this is still a long road ahead?
Listen, there's a lot to that work that we can say mission accomplished, as in the physical built environment, right? So what they set out to do was build new affordable housing and stabilize the community. Yes, but there's so much more left to be done. Unfortunately, a lot of the same issues around poverty, around access, around equity, around ownership still is at the table. And so where my intersection with that work and building on that legacy has everything to do with, what has been left unmet and unfinished. And also, how do we look to meet our potential? I think community planning and forward thinking has been in our DNA and something that we need to continue to strive for, especially when we have rezonings encroaching in different parts of the city, the borough, when we look at what does ownership even mean and how do we want to play a role in making sure that we have a seat at the table when we speak about these things. And so I'm excited to say that work has really spurred a lot of this kind of regalvanization, but unfortunately the work is
much more to do, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more to do.
So this is a subject that, we can talk about the past, we can talk about the problems. We all know what they are. I mean, I was going to add to what you said, food justice,
Right.
Social justice, environmental justice. I mean, all that stuff is also on your very long plate. But let's talk about this idea of the South Bronx Land and Community Resource Trust, which is something that Edward's going to join in just a moment, because this whole idea of a community land trust, what is it and what do you folks expect from it? Where are you in the process? And then we're going to go to the Northwest Bronx and find out where they are in the process.
Sure. We've been working in coalition with Northwest Bronx and others on a citywide front to talk about what does community ownership mean, right? And it's returning to how plans for our community have taken that away. Coming back to the table and looking at ownership, and not just through the housing lens, is looking at ownership with respect to resources and access. So we're talking about energy, solar energy. We're talking about communications via broadband, and how do we now create this module of effort that will lead to pathways of ownership, generational wealth building.
There you see the community solar, working with the New York Botanical Garden.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So thank you for that. That's actually a good time to look at what infrastructure can look like. So we received a grant from the Downtown Revitalization Initiative almost 3 years ago, just before COVID. And so what we're looking at, creating our 3 resiliency hubs within the Melrose footprint, and the resiliency hubs will bring solar canopy, stormwater management systems, and broadband connectivity. So
one last question for you, and then Edward's next, and then we'll go to Karen Washington and talk about the farms, which are populating certainly in Melrose. How do you remove land from the public marketplace and give it to the community to manage so that you can run these community solar projects and all these other things?
Is that
Jessica, and then Edward's going to talk about Northwest Bronx and where they're at.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of land that's in our community that's vacant, right? And so it's visioning land that's under city ownership, that's laying fallow and underutilized, and now starting a conversation around how do we build the opportunity to gain ownership, to acquire.
So this, just to be political about it, so the city then, which of course the mayor and the city council has to agree to take that plot of land, and I'm sure they're going to want some guidelines, and then you have to be well organized enough to take it and then utilize it properly. Okay. Edward Garcia from Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, you guys too put out a full study, and my sense is you're maybe further along than the other folks are. Talk to me about why community land trust is important to you over there in the Northwest Bronx, Kingsbridge, and even Fordham, and all the areas you serve.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, Northwest Bronx has been organizing for decades now. And even though we have had tremendous victories that we are really proud of, our efforts have not actually been enough to actually stop the displacement of the long-term residents of our neighborhood. So we knew that we needed to actually think about a pivot in our organizing to not only be reacting or reflect or kind of being in a fighting back mode, but we actually needed to think about, as we're fighting back, because that actually is really important, right? Because as we're building new models, we need to ensure that the folks that will be able to enjoy those new models that we'll be executing are able to stay. But we actually needed to also put energy into new innovative strategies that are helping us take control over our communities. Mm-hmm. And this is actually why we started to organize around community land trust through this assessment of economic democracy and racial justice. And that now was actually the pivotal moment, particularly coming out of this pandemic, to use community land trust as a tool for just recovery. So community land trusts are actually not actually something new, right? They have been going on for a really long time, and they have proven success, right? So Northwest Bronx incorporated a community land trust 2 years ago with the intention to, complement or tenant organizing opportunities. So
well, let me just jump in there. As I understand it from your study, there are 26 city-owned lots that you have identified, much like I almost said Yolanda, much like Jessica, talked about with over at Nos Quedamos, and the feeling is that my thought is, from a political point of view, Parina Sanchez is the council member up there. You have many new young council members who are thinking in these terms, that you really are on the way to acquiring these properties and be able to do something with them.
Yeah. So we knew that we couldn't compete with the private market at the moment, and that in order to allow CLTs to thrive, there needs to be additional infrastructure and other policies, which I can get to. But that there should be simple things that the city should stop doing immediately, such as transferring public land to private developers. So in our assessment, there are multiple, as Jessica mentioned, there are multiple empty parcels of land and underutilized properties that are sitting on on the city's property, and that should be transferred to community control. And so we did a participatory community research process that was able to identify a lot of those city-owned properties, because actually there isn't also a real database where we can actually assess vacant properties, city-owned properties. So we actually had to do it on our own, right? Literally, the folks who are in the block or in the neighborhood are the ones who know that that's sitting there and that has become a problem, and that vacancy is neglect.
And I will be very kind of negative about it, that maybe that's part of the reason that they don't, because they'd like to still have the control. And if there's somebody who wants to buy it for a price, they would do that. So the last thing for you, Edward, before we bring in Karen, I'm going to tell you this. Every community I talk to in the Bronx, it doesn't matter where they are, north, south, east, or west, if you said we want to have more community gardens, everybody, it's like a universal yes. Everybody would say, of course. Is that one of the things that you envision for some of these properties? And that, of course, leads right into Karen Washington on how we make these things work.
Absolutely. I think that since the very beginning of our organizing, we were clear that we wanted to organize around properties that go beyond just housing. So that definitely came up in the conversation around community gardens, and also often community space as well.
Mm-hmm. This, of course, is music to Karen Washington's ears. Karen, I was thinking I would call you the godmother of Bronx Community Gardens. You talk a little bit about how you got started, what you've been able to do, and obviously then we'll talk about the importance of these gardens. But let's go back a little bit. Tell us how you became so impassioned about gardens in the Bronx.
Because at one time, believe it or not, New York City had over 15,000 vacant lots, mostly in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color. And those that could leave, they call it white flight. And those that remain turn those empty lots into community gardens. With no
stay, right? We stay. That's it. No
resources from the city. And the fact that most of these community gardens were in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color. And so what people started to do, they started to look around their surroundings. And at first, it wasn't about food. It was about safe haven. It was about community residents taking back ownership of where they live and improving it until one day in 1998, your favorite mayor, Giuliani, tried to auction off community gardens. And I think that's where the turning point came in terms of organizing. Because before it was silence and complacency. We thought we were just doing the city a favor because there was no resources. Well, in fact, I think looking back, it was the best thing because it galvanized people. It galvanized people to start looking at their community beyond community gardens and start looking at the housing, the impact housing was having in their community, the impact that health was having in their community, the impact of environmental racism was having in their communities. And so this community garden movement started to bloom. And now you see 20, 40 years later, how now urban agriculture is on everybody's lips. And it's because of communities like the Bronx and Brooklyn and parts of Manhattan that for so long have been struggling to offset the detrimental food system. The food system in so many ways has really hurt our communities. We have fast food, we have junk food, we have processed food. What we don't have is healthy food options. And what this pandemic has shown, that even before the vaccination, that people were finding to find ways to be healthy and eat healthy. And community gardens stepped up to the plate when nobody was listening to what we were doing. And believe it or not, the Parks Department at one time was defying and say, we had to close these gardens and they only could be open to members. We took it up on ourselves to say, heck no, we need to open these gardens and we need to grow food in a way that we can support our community. And we need to partner with food pantries and soup kitchens and open food boxes and farmers markets to feed our people.
One of the things that jumps right out at me that you didn't mention, the other thing is getting people together. If they're digging and they're planting together, all of a sudden you have much more of a community. The other thing I want to ask you is about how do you do it? So Edward and the people at Northwest Bronx and Nos Quedamos, we're going to talk in a moment. They've got a bunch of community gardens. If there are people watching us now in the Bronx saying, we got that lot down the block, or as you know, I did. We have a little garden outside our building, and we turned it into a little community garden with your guidance. Talk to me a little bit about what does it take to build the things you're seeing on this screen right now.
First of all, it takes community. That's why they call it community gardens. First of all, you have to locate, and I'm so glad at the work that they all are doing. You have to locate who owns the property. If it's city owned, that is great, because all you have to do, and first of all, if it's city owned, and there's no projection in terms of it being used for housing, and it's just a vacant lot, you get 10 members. You get 10 members who are willing to form a community garden group. Reach Green Thumb, Operation Green Thumb. Green Thumb is the organization that gives you license agreements for 4 years. They will help put a fence, provide you with lumber and soil and compost to start. That's how easy it is, folks.
And then of course you need people who are committed to it and want to do it. Jessica, let's just review I was blown away. I mean, I've seen a number of community gardens in the South Bronx, but you have a map and a list of 21 community gardens. Boy, oh boy, that is incredibly impressive.
Well, that was all as a result of Mama Yolanda and the other community members who helped shape the Melrose Urban Renewal Plan, right? That was their foresight to know and understand that, protecting open space and having access was so important to really dealing with the issues around environmental justice, or in this case, racism, right? Mm-hmm. Frankly.
And what has it done for the community? In other words, do you have a palatable sense that something has changed? I mean, whether people are working together, maybe they're a little bit healthier, maybe they understand the environment better, or am I answering my own question?
No, I think there's definitely momentum, right? Especially after COVID. I think COVID really kind of reshifted everyone's priorities and centered it to really look at what does it mean and to be self-determined? What does it mean to be self-sufficient, right? And these gardens really help bring the community as a whole to a different level of self-sufficiency. And so part of the resiliency hub work that we're developing is about bringing now to complement the self-sufficiency, but now self-determination. What happens in a time of crisis? What happens if there's another COVID, or if there's a blackout, or if there's, another crisis that we all can count on, right? It's just a matter of when, not if. What are we doing to be prepared for that? And so really looking at community preparedness, emergency management, using these central hubs as activation spaces where we can come together now and look forward to how we respond to that.
And listen, I've seen it and I've been to, a number of them. Look how nice it is, though, to do it in a garden with a little bit of shade, with a little bit of nature in a difficult urban place. Jessica, I want to ask you, and then I'm going to ask Edward about some individual projects. I talked at the top of the show about credit unions.
Yes.
You just worked with Wetco and some other groups and opened a Bronx credit union. Talk to me about this is slightly off the garden path, but how does that help, the people in the community, or is it just plainly obvious?
Well, listen, it's a direct response to the increased bank branch closures, right? After COVID, we started seeing more and more banks closing in our community, which, as it was, is already, an equity and access issue. Nos Quedamos teamed up with WECCO, United Health, UNHP, Banana Kelly, and the Lower East Side People's Credit Union to come up with a plan to create access through a mobile banking unit, so that we're creating now the mobile unit to bring in your community. We're looking at establishing a Bronx Credit Union through this effort, but it's about self-determination. It's about, listen, we can't continue to let banks leave our community with no solution as a result or in their wake, right? Like, we're left with these gaps of access that no longer has been met.
I have to tell you, the notion of, because maybe, Citibank or Chase or Bank of America does it, but the notion of having a credit union with a mobile unit, an effective mobile unit, that's pretty cool. I have to say that's
exciting.
It's exciting. Now, is that happening or it will happen?
Yeah, no, we went to our first location.
Wow.
We're doing once a week right now. We just hired a project coordinator.
Wow.
So we're going to be, really doing the round robin. This week was in Melrose. And so there's a schedule that we could share.
Great.
So folks can look out. We really want to get this
I just want to move it on. I will just tell you, these three people are why I love the Bronx, because we're just figuring it out ourselves. They're not doing it. We'll do it. Edward, I do want to ask you about the Kingsbridge Armory. I know you guys had a big membership meeting recently. It's been made clear that ICE Center concept is not going to happen. What's the mood of the people at the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition to do with that building that has just an immense amount of potential?
I just want to highlight that I think we were really proud of winning the community benefits agreement in 2013. Yes. That really promised real tangible items for community, local hiring, local procurement, and revenue sharing. And there
was also 50,000 square feet of community space that was earmarked for it.
That's right. And so even though we're disappointed, I think this creates an opportunity for community members to learn from our mistakes, but also think about the new things that we should be aiming for. And so we relaunched our Kingsbridge Armory campaign at our annual meeting back in February. And so some of the useful learnings that I think that we want to do differently this time that were not included before is that we need to ensure that the community around it is protected, right? We want to ensure that every business owner, every tenant is well protected, right? And we noticed the pressures that many of the commercial residents and the residents around the neighborhood have felt because of the rezonings and also because of the armory. And so that the values and principles that we develop are the ones that should be guiding the development of the armory.
So it sounds like you don't really have a thing like we want a basketball court or we want a food market. What you want to do is use the whole concept to build a larger community around it and then come up with an answer, right? I mean, if I understand what you've been telling me.
That's correct.
Karen Washington, let's just go back. I mean, the idea of, I mentioned climate justice before. Talk to me about how you see establishing climate justice in the borough of the Bronx. Certainly through the kind of work that you do. You have a farm upstate that you work on. Just talk about some of those things and how that plays to helping us breathe cleaner air, eat better food, etc.
Well, the thing is, the community gardens have always been designated as the lungs of the city, but you can't separate climate justice without economic justice, without food justice. And so for many of us, we're looking at these community gardens in terms of economic development. For so long, it's been on a volunteer element, but people need to look at our communities in the Bronx as being self-sufficient and self-reliant. And it's about job creation. No one comes to our community talking about investment, entrepreneurship. And now is the time for us to shift the power back into our hands to start developing jobs, developing factories, developing shops that are owned by our people, our community, and thinking about building wealth. Because if we can build wealth within our community, then some of the things when we talk about climate change, some of the things we talk about health can be mitigated. And so I'm proud that many community gardens and this administration is starting to look at urban agriculture for the first time, having an Office of Urban Agriculture for the first time, and then having organizations like Green Worker Cooperatives who are also looking at getting people to create jobs, to be self-sufficient, to self-reliant. We are tired of looking at people looking at the Bronx in terms of scarcity, problems, deficits. That is in the past. The Bronx is booming. Where's the Bronx hot sauce? Wait a second. Do you know?
The Bronx hot sauce.
Do you know that the Bronx has a Bronx hot sauce? We grow serrano peppers. We get paid for it, and we have the Bronx hot sauce. And so,
I just want to answer your question. Where is the Bronx hot sauce? It's actually in my refrigerator.
Oh, see, well, you need to bring it out. But again,
and they've all been opened. The red, the green,
But again, with the work that we're doing is not in silos. So you can't say, what are we doing about environmental justice? What are we doing about food justice? It all interacts because it all affects us.
That's it. Jessica got emotional right there. Jessica, let's just wrap it up now. Congrats. Nos Quedamos received the Urban Future Lab Prize. It came with a $50,000 price tag. So just what message would you give? You got about 30 seconds or so. What message would you give to the people of the Bronx about the work you do and how they can participate and build their own community?
I'm gonna stand in line with Miss Karen over there. I mean, it's absolute. That's the direction. The direction is fighting forward. The direction is being in front of the solutions and not being reactionary. It's about becoming self-sufficient and self-determined. It's about time. No one's going to rescue us, in other words, right? Like we have to and have been for many years, but are finally now getting some access to resources, deep resources that could help us like really make that change. So I want everyone to come on, plug in, and let's step together on making this work collectively.
Wow. That really doesn't leave Edward a lot to say. I'm not sure because I know all three of you are pretty much on the same page. Edward, just final thoughts from you about Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. What's next? What are you working on? What message do you want to give to the general public?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to continue to relaunch this public land campaign and hoping that in the future, the city will continue to uplift models like community land just to grow and expand. And the other things like the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, a legislation that will be key in ensuring that residents get first right of refusal. So I think we're building a landscape so that we can actually be at the forefront and actually be able to gain control of our communities, build wealth, and be able to ensure that the wealth stays in our community.
We only have a couple of seconds. Karen Washington, the leading crop that you sell from the farm in Chester, New York is?
Heirloom tomatoes.
Okay, you see them, get them. Anyway, listen, thank you so much. Let's see, it's Jessica Clemente, who's the president and CEO of Nos Quedamos, Edward Garcia, who's the director of community development at NWBCCC, and Karen Washington, a longtime friend, who's a farmer and activist, co-owner of Rise and Root Farm, and co-founder of Black Urban Growers. And we're going to do more next week, but a whole different topic. We're going to talk about traffic and why the cars are all over the roads these days and why you can't get anywhere in the Bronx. And we'll talk about the drivers who are driving not really legally and parking and all the other things that are involved in traffic in our roads. So that's all. Good night. Love the Bronx. See you.